Welcome to Sewing Out Loud, the official podcast of Zede Sewing Studio. Here are your hosts, Zede and Mallory.
Sewing Out Loud.
That's a good one.
This is a good one. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I think it's a
Okay.
good one.
Well, this is Mallory Donahue,
This is Zede Donahue.
and today I'm going to interview Mom about a kind of a fun topic. And a lot of you might not be expecting this, but Mom, your mother.
Correct. I had a mother.
You had a mother.
I'm your mother.
Yep. Your mom, my grandma, didn't want you to have a sewing machine. And can you tell us?
I'm not sure she didn't want me to. She told me I was wanting one desperately.
Right. And she said.
And her words were, "You'll hate it.
You'll
You won't
hate it.
like it. And anything anybody makes is ugly."
So, well, that's
It
why
looked-
I was
it
going to
looked-
ask you why she said
Yeah,
that, but you just,
it looks homemade.
yeah. So talk about that a little bit. Talk about why she said
Well,
that and what happened.
You know, she was raised during the Depression, of course. Her father died early. There was, so there was a financial issue in the family of how to clothe 6 children. She was the youngest girl, and apparently her mother would buy a bolt of fabric. That's what you did in these days. And the older daughters then would make the clothes for the entire family.
Yeah.
So I guess your underwear matched your blouse because it was all out of this one bolt of fabric. And then, of course, my poor mother would wind up wearing that fabric like 4 times over because
Sure.
she was the youngest. So, she might wear the same floral, pink floral dress made 16 different ways or what
Sure.
because she got the hand-me-downs also.
Well, she got the older sister's dress
right.
2
She was
years
wearing,
later,
which
a
of
year
course
later.
probably didn't fit her either.
Right.
If I remember correctly, she had the longest legs of the bunch, so it probably didn't work out very well. And she just said, "You won't like it. You won't like it. It never turns out right," and all of this. And so I was around like 10 or 12 when I started this, because when I was about 8, I made my own Halloween costume with a needle and thread.
And what were you?
I was a scarecrow. And I didn't know you could buy yardage even. And my mother, we had these curtains. They were made out of black and white gingham, and they hung in our basement to divide off like the tool area from the area we played in, right? And, made it look nicer, I guess. The basement was not finished. And my mother got like new curtains or whatever. And I saw that this was yardage. This is fabric. So I laid down this fabric on the floor and I drew around myself onto this fabric with a crayon. And I made like this pancake top tunic-y thing, and of course I was in dancing, so I wore like black tights and I had this straw hat but anyway, so I made my scarecrow costume. Okay. And I remember, I didn't hem anything. I made the edges all raggy. And maybe that's why I was a scarecrow, because I didn't know about hemming.
Sure.
I certainly didn't know about how to it's good that I was thin. I was scrawny.
You were a little kid.
So this
right.
pancake, fit me because I was
yes.
a scrawny little
Yes.
kid. If I would have had any like roundness or shape to me, if I would have been 12, it probably wouldn't have
Right.
worked. So from the time, I did that, I kept saying, I know I want a sewing machine. I know I want, and I'd watch other people sew, and the neighbor had a sewing machine in her basement. And I would stand there and drool over it. And I would just look at it and I would go crazy. And then in Girl Scouts, we had to make toys one Christmas for, you always had a toy drive. It was a big thing the Girl Scouts did. And our troop was making this like stuffed animal. It was like a pre-printed thing that you had to stitch together. And they just handed them out and said, stitch these together. I guess in those days, this was the 60s.
Yeah,
well, no. Was it even the 60s? Well, yeah, it might have been the
early 60s.
Oh, probably 1959-ish.
Yeah.
Anyway, they just assumed everyone had a sewing machine. And we didn't, because my mother wasn't, if a button fell off, she could do that. Or like we needed a zipper in something, when people used to repair clothes, she'd send it to the cleaners.
Sure.
Or gave it to one of those older sisters or something. But, we didn't really repair clothes.
So you were a little atypical for that.
At that time,
time
we were,
period.
because everybody's mother was teaching them to sew, or their grandmother was
Sure.
teaching them to sew, or they were sewing doll clothes. Well, that was another issue I had. I didn't really play with dolls. Okay, I did things like refinished furniture and played and played soccer, and I did really weird things. Okay, I was probably not your typical girl. I just was not a doll person. I wanted like dogs, like live things.
Right.
So anyway, I mean, I begged, and I begged for a sewing machine, and I did have an aunt. It was not her sister, it was the aunt that married into the family, who actually worked in a garment factory. Okay, and this was on my mother's side, and my father actually took this aunt, and they went and bought me a sewing machine, and this was an expensive sewing machine. I still have the receipt.
Yeah.
I should go get it. I think it was $248.
We're gonna have to. We'll be putting.
We can. I'll show you the picture of it.
Yeah.
It was a Necky.
Uh-huh.
It was one of those metal sewing machines. Actually, I do still have it. I sewed on it for about 30 years, and it was the top of the line. It had cams. It did decorative stitches. And think about this. I'd never really sewn on a sewing machine.
Right.
So the guy that they bought this sewing machine from, my dad gives this to me for my 13th birthday. So that would have been 1968 by then, right?
No, 66. I mean, you were born in, right? 13th birthday.
13th
Okay.
birthday. Yeah, it was 66. Yeah, I'm sorry. It was 66. Yeah, I think I was like in, so at 13, I was in like seventh grade, I think.
Yeah.
I think it was 7th grade. And this man came to our house that night. They gave me the sewing machine, and he came to the house that night, and he showed that afternoon and showed up me how to sew that on that sewing machine. Showed my dad, showed me, and
clarification, just so you know, we do not come to your house.
No.
Okay, yeah.
Well, for a price.
Back to our regular programming. Okay.
But for a price, I would do that.
I
But
guess.
anyway, so my father and I went to Penny's, which sold fabric on the bolt at the time. Bought a pattern, bought some, it was called Tattersall plaid. Yeah. I assume it was cotton. I think it was 39 cents a yard. And a zipper. A zipper too. And I made an A-line skirt that night that I wore to school the next day.
And so the rest is history.
The legend began there.
Yes. When you got it when you were 13.
I got it when I was 13.
13's like an important number for Mom.
Yeah, that's true.
Didn't know
that is true, because I was born on the 13th also. Actually, my mother died on the 13th.
I know. There's lots of 13
There's
things.
a lot of 13s.
Yeah.
What I do want you to know is I sewed. I mean, I was like, somebody set me free. I was like creating these things. I was looking at how things were made, and I didn't have a job, but you know, people would give me $1 and I could buy 3 yards of fabric or whatever.
Yeah.
And my mother was just in awe. Like, she sort of stood by the sidelines, and didn't say much, and she couldn't sew.
Right.
She didn't need to sew. She was the youngest of all these, these girls were,
Well,
she had all these girls that were older than her, and she was unhappy with their products, so she didn't learn.
From what I know about our family and everything, like your mom, like you said, grew up in this, really kind of poor environment.
Right.
And I think maybe, and I could be wrong here, it was for her to be able to buy her own beautiful, fashionable clothing. It was probably a big badge of honor for her.
And it probably was. And she was very, very stylish woman.
Yes.
She really was. So she wasn't just going to wear just anything.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
And what evolved, what was kind of funny, is this is really funny, because my mother was about 5'8", and I'm 5 foot.
That's funny.
and I was her natural child. I was biologically came from her.
Yes.
Who knows what happened? But things didn't. She had problems with length.
Yes.
There weren't, especially like with sleeve length on a coat. It was never long enough. Things like that. So it would have been just about a year later. Her birthday was at the end of January. Mine's right in the middle of February. I made her a nightgown with sleeves that were finally long enough. She'd never had sleeves. Right. And actually, I made her a nightgown, I think, every year for her birthday for about 10 years because, she got the nightgown that was long enough for her. And it was very funny because she then finally, after a couple of years, came to me and said, think you could make this?
Yeah.
So I'm now sewing for my mother.
For your mom.
Right.
That's funny.
It was pretty funny. And I sewed for myself all through high school, self-taught. I listened to, went to the library, got books, did whatever I could. And I would make myself like 2 or 3 dresses on the weekend.
Absolutely.
And then the best part about it is no one knew I made them.
That's the mark of a...
And I think that was part of my... I knew that they shouldn't look like I made them. And I will tell you, after I started sewing and I realized there was a process of deciding what you were going to make, deciding what you were going to make it out of.
Right.
What was the fit? How was the fit going to work? And then I eventually taught myself to change the shape of the collar or leave the collar off.
Sure.
Or, I don't have to do a facing. I can do a bias binding. I sort of evolved with all this. But, of course, my aunts were still alive, and now they're dead, so I can say this. The stuff they made was pretty bad.
Right.
They looked like they were upholstered.
Everything. It's called couch killers.
Right. It was like... they weren't picking the right. Now, the aunt who married into the family, she was a resource.
Sure.
And then my father had a sister.
Yeah,
also.
all these aunts. I was thinking about that. Yeah, so this is the aunt. This is a different aunt. Your father's sister.
Right. That was Annabelle.
Uh-huh.
My mother's. Okay, yeah. Annabelle helped pick out the sewing machine, and she worked in the sewing factory. Okay, and everything, and she was very fashionable. So
she Phyllis's mom.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So she would be Jill and Jennifer's grandmother.
I'm just getting this. Okay.
Okay. So, Mallory never knew any of these people. Everyone died
I was
kind
late.
of young,
I came up late in the game, and so I didn't know a lot of people.
And these people they actually, Annabelle and my mother died at very young ages. And it was sad. I was very close to both of them. But then I had Aunt Marie, who was in California, who moved to California when people, there wasn't a lot of people out there. It was like her and Ronald Reagan. And I say Ronald Reagan because she sewed for him.
Right.
She sewed for Universal Studios. She sewed for all of the old-time movie stars. And she eventually, was in the union and everything.
Sure.
In fact, she would call me up, and this was when long distance, you waited till like 9 o'clock at night and the rates went down or whatever.
Right.
And I would talk to her and she'd say, you need to watch the Carol Burnett show.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know, there's got to be some people out there that know about the Scarlet O'Hara dress.
I think we may have referenced it on this podcast before, actually.
Because she was in there with Bob Mackie. Bob Mackie made all of Carol Burnett's clothes at that time. He was this young guy. He was up and coming. And he was doing more of the, he's still alive. He was doing the art garment.
Right. So
more artwork on garments and things like that.
She helped make that drape dress.
Yes.
The Gone with the Wind spoof dress.
Yep, she sure did.
And Carol comes out and says, I saw it in the window and I just couldn't resist.
And it had like the tassels hanging off of it.
And
the curtain rod was on her shoulders. Yeah. Right.
Well, and didn't she also make Jamie Lee Curtis's prom dress?
She did, and we have a picture of it someplace.
Yeah, we do.
We absolutely. That'd be nice if we could get that on the blog.
Did she help make it, or did she?
No. I think what happened is she was sewing, and Janet Leigh knew who Marie was. That's Jamie Lee's mother.
Yeah.
And somehow she wound up making this dress for her. It was this flowy white thing without a back in it. It was really pretty.
No, we do have a picture
think it was a prom dress. I'm not sure. It was some sort of event dress.
Yeah.
But she was very young. And Jamie Lee, I didn't know who she was at the time.
Oh, sure.
Actually, your sister Lindsay's also named after
an actress.
Lindsay Wagner, right, who was not known at the time, and her name is actually Lindsay Marie, and she was named after that Lindsay Marie is her name. But yeah, and she told me Ronald Reagan was going to run for president, and she couldn't believe it. But because she saw him as this actor,
right? Sure.
Yeah,
sure,
he was married to the other wife then, and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I used to get the lowdown on all of that,
stuff.
so that was fun. That was. But she also taught me that you could do anything.
Yeah.
And she's the one that taught me I didn't need a pattern, because I would call her up and I'd say, I want to do this, and I can't find a pattern. And she goes, you can do that. And I go, well, how would I do that? And she goes, well, measure yourself and gather it. I mean, she was, because she was doing all of this bizarre costuming.
Sure, all this draping and making and
right.
Work,
And they would throw something at her and say, we need this.
Yeah.
Can you or two or three of you figure out if we can do this? Costumers are more busy on this. The other thing that she worked on, Jackie Gleason had, what was that dance troupe? And that's where she taught me how to cannibalize costumes, where you start out maybe with a long dress and eventually,
it's a showgirl,
right? It's a showgirl bikini by the last time you use it, But you used it, you kept using these things instead of just letting them hang there. You recut them, so I learned a lot of that from her, and she taught me to be brave. The other thing she did for me is, on my birthday, she would send me yardage. I would just get yardage, and some of it sometimes was, they would let them buy things from the studio if they didn't use the yardage, right?
Sure.
Or they had something left over, or they cleaned out at a certain time in the year, and they would be allowed to buy things. So sometimes
don't we have a couple Bob Mackie shawls?
We have a shawl, actually, that was given to her on her retirement.
Is that the black one?
Yes, with the big long fringe.
So I wore that to prom.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh,
you
okay.
don't remember that? I wore that.
Well, I remember my friend Brenda wore it too.
I wore that white dress. We had a cheap wedding dress from David's Bridal, and we slid it up the front.
Well, we sewed the slit up the back.
No.
And then slid it up the side.
But that dress was for something else first. Somebody threw that ridiculous black and white birthday party for
that's
themselves
right.
in high school. Somebody threw a
right, you had to have a black and white dress.
Yeah, and so I wore a white dress, and then we used it for prom too. Talk about cannibalizing. Yeah, we sewed the slit up the back, and then made a slit in the front. And I wanted it to not be white for prom, and so you put a black ruffle around the top.
Right, and we put some black beads on it.
Yeah, and then I wore that black.
And you wore black gloves.
And a black Bob Mackie shawl.
Yeah,
with my $80 David's Bridal.
Refashioned, cannibalized, and
It looks pretty hot. I'm pretty sure we got pictures of that somewhere. So yeah, we'll try to we can get the shawl up there.
But that is my history of sewing.
Well, thanks for sharing, Mom. I learned
my mother didn't want me to have a sewing machine, but I got one anyway. And
thank goodness. Thank goodness.
It made me happy.
So tell us,
it still does.
So tell us if your mom did or did not want you to have a sewing machine, and did your mother's disposition towards sewing make you want to sew or make you not want to sew? I'm interested.
Or did you have to wear clothes that made you look like a couch?
Yeah, tell us about that. Tell us about your couch killer stories. Well, thank you for listening, everyone.
So long.
Thanks for listening to Sewing Out Loud. For even more expert sewing advice, visit sewhere.com.